Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Edgar Rice Burroughs podcast, where we celebrate the writings of the greatest adventure novelist of the 20th century, Edgar Rice Burroughs. My name is Tim DeForest. I've written several books about what I call pre-digital pop culture, including the pulp magazines where Burroughs stuff was often first published. And I keep a blog about such subjects as well. And I'm joined today by my two co-hosts. Jess, go ahead.
My name is Jess Terrell, and you would know me from the Facebook discussion group, The Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs, where we talk ERB pretty near 24/7. Would love to have you come join us. The Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs.
I'm Scott Stewart, retiring editor of the ERB APA, which is now going to be in the very capable hands of Scott Tracy Griffin. So, anyone interested in that area, that will be your contact in the future now.
Okay, and tonight, in a few minutes, we're going to begin talking about Tarzan the Terrible, the 1921 novel featuring the Jungle Lord, a direct sequel to Tarzan the Untamed. But before that, yes, I hear the apes of Kershak reminding us that we have a few special features. And our first special feature is an interview that I was able to do with a writer named Jarrett Keene, a professor of literature and the graphic novel at the University of Las Vegas. And he's written several excellent books. I've had a chance to meet him once when he was visiting the school I work at, and he actually specifically asked to meet me because he is a fan of our podcast. And I wanted to return that favor by posting a brief interview with him. The books he writes are superb adventure novels. I think if you're a fan of that genre, and if you're listening to an Edgar Rice Burroughs podcast, you certainly are, you would enjoy his books immensely. So here is my interview with Jared. Hi. Okay, so I am meeting via Zoom with Jarrett Keene, who is a professor at the University of Las Vegas in Nevada, where you teach it's American literature and the graphic novel, correct? That's what you teach?
Yes, the
Uh,
two best subjects a professor can possibly land on in the
yeah.
department is concerned.
Okay, but Jared is also an incredibly talented writer and editor, and he was kind enough to give me the copy of his book Hammer of the Dogs when we met in Sarasota. I think it was last year, which I read and loved. It's set in a post-apocalyptic Las Vegas. It was a great novel, and then you were also generous enough to send me your three westerns as they were printed by Wolfpack Publication. The three featuring the main character of Kid Crimson. And I cannot recommend these novels more highly. They were just more fun than a barrel of gunfighting monkeys or whatever. They're just wonderful. I'm going to talk about some of the things I loved about them. But Jared, I wanted to ask you, where did the character of Kid Crimson come from? And how would you describe it?
Well, Kid Crimson is what you might call an anti-hero in the Jonah Hex tradition of
Mhm.
weird Western tales, and but a lot of Kid Crimson's aggression and penchant for fisticuffs, I think, is inspired by having read all those wonderful Jack Kirby Western comic books as a kid, and I'm talking about obviously Rawhide Kid, Two Gun
Mhm.
Kid, Outlaw Kid. So Kid Crimson is a is definitely influenced by Kirby's wild, imaginative take on the Western. And, I just wanted to bring something a little different to what I think is a beautiful and compelling genre.
Mhm.
Westerns, I feel, they ebb and flow in terms of popularity, and I wanted to apply all my imaginative force into making something that people would love to pick up and read and finish and then read the next installment. And I wanted it to be maybe a combination of Jonah Hex and again those early Kirby Westerns from the late 50s, early 60s, Rawhide Kid, etc.
Mhm.
That's for me is what I was after with Kid Crimson. But of course, I can't help but be influenced by the TV that I watched at my grandmother's house.
Mhm.
Gunsmoke,
Mhm.
Banana. There's certainly a lot of those. What would you call them? They had there's a flourishes of soap opera elements in throughout Kid Crimson. That it's not just a book for dudes. It's hopefully something that appeals to all readers.
Yeah, I think it does. You certainly have some strong women characters in them, some strong
Yes.
female characters. And I think in a I can see the comic book influence in these, in some of the elements that you weave into that. One thing I love about the books is you have bizarre things that you don't normally equate with Westerns in them. But you've made them make sense in context. One book, there's basically a hot air balloon dogfight, is one way you could describe. Another book has an armored elephant charging as part of the charge on the bad guys who are firing cannon into the town. Um, the last
Yeah.
one had the bad guys using trebuchets to hurl flaming barrels of kerosene.
Ab-
When you add those to the climax, which includes armored stagecoaches and Gatling guns. And it's just all wonderful. I loved reading it, and I love the way you took all those disparate West elements that you don't think of as being part of the Western genre and making them fit into that genre.
Well, it's funny because when I was writing Kid Crimson, I was fresh off having completed a post-apocalyptic adventure novel, and you know what? It dawned on me that that era of American history I'm talking about, the intense mining of the West,
Mhm.
the Civil War. This was an apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic era, if there ever was one in American history. Trying to eradicate slavery throughout the United States. This is something that it was a very dark and maybe dismal chapter in our
Mhm.
history, and I wanted it to take that on, but also add these fantastic elements so that
Mhm.
it's not it's not a grinding ordeal to try to have to read about these terrible moments in our history. I wanted to add the hot air balloon,
Mhm.
armored elephant charge, and
Mhm.
everything else. I love fanciful weaponry,
Mhm.
and Kid Crimson is provides an opportunity to explore all those. I envision a book that centers on submarine warfare. Early submarine warfare. I want to get all of that in there because it's so fascinating, and as dark and depressing as some of that time was, I also want to create an aspirational hero, which is
Mhm.
in my mind what Edgar Rice Burroughs was after, as a writer. His heroes to me are people that I wanted to be as a young person. I wanted to
Mhm.
be Tarzan, I wanted to be John Carter, and I
Mhm.
wanted to do my very best to achieve that status of heroism. And so that's why I think I'm so enamored with your podcast, and because
Mhm.
you don't shrink from that. You're not about deconstructing Tarzan, uh,
Mhm.
providing a limited academic analysis. You're about celebrating the varied and dynamic imagination of an author of that power, of that caliber.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that's exactly what we're going to. We've no interest in deconstruction at all. We just want to take those books as they are, fantastic adventure stories, and just appreciate that.
Edgar
So,
Rice Burroughs is up there with Jack Kirby and
mhm.
these other legends. Obviously Edgar Rice Burroughs was a writer first. Kirby was
Mhm.
a stronger visual artist, but their imaginations power so much of what we enjoy today and take for granted in our entertainment. Media.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see a graphic novel adaptation of the Kid Crimson novels with Kirby's art if he were still around.
Yes, that's what I was
The
after. Yeah.
elements in that would fit him, and he would appreciate the imagination that went into them.
Yes.
Um, the way I saw Kid Crimson, and you can tell me if this is what you intended or if I'm one of those annoying readers that puts his own interpretation on things. I see him as someone because he had an extremely abusive father for a child during his childhood. I see him as someone who may have been a violent bad guy, but because he found this surrogate family in Virginia City, a father, a woman he loved, kids he adopted, all of that, that kept him more or less moral. He's still kind of an anti-hero. He shoots a whole lot of people, but
Yeah.
most of them deserve shooting. So what the heck? Um, I just see him as someone who probably would have been a villain if he hadn't found a healthy family in Virginia City, even if it was, a surrogate family, but it's still the love was there. And that's what I thought drove him to be a hero rather than a villain. Is that it?
Absolutely. They
Yeah.
rescue him. They save him.
Hmm.
and he's so grateful for them, and that's why he works so darn hard to
Hmm.
protect them and shield them from the war, the bandits,
Hmm.
the political machinations, the psychopaths roaming the Southwest. If he can't protect them, he has nothing. But
Hmm.
at the same time, he loves violence, and
Yeah.
he leans into a violent confrontation whenever possible because he was raised that way, and he calls it the monster
Hmm.
that lives inside him, but it's probably something even worse than that. It's probably just the sick thrill of eliminating an opponent.
Hmm.
And he knows that that is not something he can succumb to entirely because number one, if he dies, it leaves his family out in the lurch. And also number two, it's he knows there's something better for him.
Yeah.
There's a mission that he needs to accomplish, even if he can't articulate it well or explain
Hmm.
uh, what that is. And ultimately, I don't want to give away too much because I'm writing more installments, but there's going to be a religious conversion too that I think will be very interesting for readers that they're going to really get a kick out of it.
I'm looking forward to more of it. Um, and just I wanted to also just quickly mention the supporting cast.
Oh,
They just Kid Crimson by himself is a great protagonist. But what gives these novels heart are his surrogate family, the unusual people he that come around him, the villains too. Your last novel had a trio of brutal killers who each had their own individual weapon, special weapon, which just
yeah.
gave them just real personality and made for some cool action scenes. And I love stuff like that. So amongst the good guys, he gets like this sort of ragtag band of misfits kind of following him, people who sincerely care about him, but are there when there's trouble. Um, I love the character, and I don't want to give too much away either, but the Sarah, the Indian girl he adopts as a daughter, who has this rapport with animals,
Yes.
including a circus lion, which is a handy ally to have in certain circumstances. So just Bad Jace, who I was convinced was going to be a bad guy in the beginning of the first book, and then he gradually becomes an ally of the Kid Crimson. I probably gave away too much there. I'm sorry,
No, no. I mean,
but
there's
I love these characters all come together to give the book so much personality and heart. So it's more than there's wonderful action all throughout. You write great action scenes, but that plus these great characters really make these special novels, I think. So,
well, the cast was so much fun to write.
mhm,
Poppy, his opium den nymph that he's
mhm,
she's a Chinese young woman entrepreneur there trying to make a go at it in Virginia City. And I just think that this combination of a elite gunfighter and a woman who honestly believes she's saving men who have been wounded in war from nightmares by giving them this analgesic, this painkiller is to me is so intriguing, and
mhm,
it makes for an interesting relationship. At the same time, they're trying to raise this young orphan boy there in the town, Ezra, little shoe shine kid. And they're unlikely parents, but they forge an unlikely and very intense bond together.
mhm.
They're trying to replicate something that they never enjoyed because of their, individual trauma.
Okay. And um, well, we're running up to our time limit because I do have to edit this into the podcast. So I'd love to go longer, but um,
Can I
I
just say that
am.
I just love not just the podcast, but also your blog?
Oh, thank you.
The way that you just take in everything,
Mhm,
old radio shows, animated TV series, comic books, novels, all of you're just this encyclopedic tsunami of popular culture. And
Well,
I'm so grateful that you do what you do, and you take the time and the care to present this information because I'm just fascinated by it. And it's inspiring. I think more writers should tune into what you're doing, because I know they're come up with 1,000 ideas, and
Hmm.
honestly, Kid Crimson, at least 20% of it is just inspired by the energy that you pour into the podcast and the blog and everything that you do. So I'm just very grateful for your dedication to what I call unpopular popular culture, or culture that has sort of faded in
Yeah.
people's memory, and you're there leading us back into that cave of dreams. It's just
I
really.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Yeah, I refer to it as pre-digital pop culture, just to kind of
Mhm.
set, so and I really appreciate that. That's nice to know. I know I do have some readers of the blog. I'll probably never be world famous, but I enjoy writing it, and I appreciate there are people who like yourself who read it and get something out of it.
And not to put
Uh,
too much pressure on you, Tim, but if you
mm,
can bring out some more books, I'm happy to.
okay. I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
I love your
Um,
books as
Well,
well.
thank you. I appreciate that. I want to mention one more book you've read that written recently, the Decide and Survive series, which is
Oh
coming
yeah.
out. Because it was written, I know a couple of the teachers at the Ringling College of Art who wrote it, and I believe Ryan Van Cleve is actually editing it, I think.
Yes.
And I read his book, and I got it's kind of like the choose your own adventure books, and they're very well researched with historical settings.
Oh yes.
Ryan's was a Revolutionary War one. I got the poor girl killed by the choices I made, which
Mhm.
but yours is the Pearl Harbor one, right? And then you've got Battle of Gettysburg that's coming out soon.
Yes, very
And
soon.
so anyone who's got kids or grandkids, you want them interested in history, these Decide and Survive books are brilliant. They're well written, well researched. This choose your own adventure thing. Like if you go into this room, go to page 13. If you run
Yeah.
away, turn to page 43, and so on, that sort of thing, which is an awful lot of fun and gives kids reading it some sort of agency. And I enjoyed reading it as an adult, the Ryans at least, and I'm looking forward to yours.
Oh yeah.
And
They're
so,
they're for all ages. You can be
mhm,
a retro enthusiast and enjoy the heck out
yeah,
of it.
yep. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, do you remember the first Edgar Rice Burroughs novel you ever read, and what's your favorite Burroughs novel?
Well, it's the first Tarzan novel is the one that changed everything for me because
Hmm.
I watching the movie that didn't do justice and change things in the that I didn't realize.
Hmm.
It wasn't until honestly I encountered the novel in graduate school that I said, "Oh, wait a minute, this is brilliant." He just one example is the professors, who are there, exploring and investigating and writing about researching, the African continent. They speak in
Academies.
they speak in what I would call like a jargon or a language that is almost indecipherable. While
Hmm.
everyone else, the native characters, the animals, Tarzan, they speak very clearly and
Hmm.
they're very articulate. The only people that we have trouble understanding is the academics. That's a complete inversion and
Hmm.
of what you find, what you typically find in those some of the rather terrible jungle adventures where the African natives, indigenous people, speak in this indecipherable patois, and
Hmm.
I just really admire the way that Edgar Rice Burroughs is committed to changing and upending expectations throughout that first novel alone. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just a masterpiece of subverting expectations. And I didn't realize that he was that clever and he had that kind of attitude towards the academic profession. And
Hmm.
Tarzan is just a brilliant concept. Uh,
Hmm.
and I don't think anyone really understands how it's it's an early version of the cliche that the jungle adventure eventually settled into. And
Hmm.
he was never satisfied. All his books, John Carter, even the one that we were talking about when I was in Florida last time, I Am a Barbarian. I mean, there's just so much that he does in each novel that upends your expectations. He's not a boring and conventional writer by any stretch. He's always infusing his adventures with ideas that you're not ready for or that people don't really understand. Because I think, frankly, a lot of people are lazy and they just see the Tarzan movies or the comics and they think, oh, that's hokum, that's silly. And what
Mhm.
he's doing is so elaborate and
Mhm.
fantastic. And I want to write a jungle adventure in his honor, but I just haven't hit on the right set of ideas or characters yet. He's so inspiring.
He is. He's just a wonderful writer. Always entertaining, able to keep you on the edge of your seat, and sometimes more thoughtful than a lot of people give him credit for.
He
Um,
he was not a regressive writer. He was very
mm,
progressive
yeah,
uh, in his views. And I come to find out, I think he was in Pearl Harbor during.
he was playing tennis with his son when the attack started at Pearl
Um,
Harbor. So
and that was so fascinating. I was trying to figure out a way to put him in my Decide and Survive book as a
mhm.
little cameo or guest appearance.
there There is a book by Max Allan Collins called The Pearl Harbor Murders, where where he solves a murder as well as witnessing the Pearl Harbor attack. So it's a wonderful book. Um,
I've got to check it out. I love Max Allan Collins. He's
I yeah, oh I do. He's a superb writer. So okay, well I just appreciate your taking the time to meet with us via the Zoom call and talk about your books. And I look if you write more Kid Crimson stuff, I will definitely read it, and I recommend them highly to our readers, to our listeners. So
well,
um,
I plan on it, and like I said, I'm just a big fan first of everything you do there, and
mhm.
I hope there's more episodes in the can forthcoming with the podcast.
Yeah, I wish we could do them a little more often, but we're scattered about the United States, and the 3 or 4 a year we're able to do is probably the best we're going to be able to do. I would love to do it more often. So
Well, convey to Jess and Scott that I love everything the three of you put together. So
thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you again. We're going to return to our regularly scheduled podcast now. Okay, and I want to thank Jarrett one more time for taking the time out to record that interview with me. And I appreciate his compliments towards our podcast, especially his pointing out that we do not deconstruct these novels here. We don't like look for modern ways of picking them apart and spoiling people's enjoyments. We just treat them as the wonderful adventure stories they are. And we analyze them with that in mind. And if Jarrett and other people listening recognize that, then I think we're accomplishing something here on the podcast. And the second special feature is our trivia question. And this um, our trivia question, which I will ask in a minute, must be answered by sending the answer to our email address, edgarsmailbag@gmail.com, and that will also be in the show notes. So I'm going to ask the question in a moment. In order to be in on the prize, um, you need to send the answer there. If you post it elsewhere on social media where we post this or anywhere else, it doesn't count. You have to send it into the Gmail to be in the running for a prize. And Jess, you recently sent me a box of stuff for the new prize, several of the authorized editions of Edgar Rice Burroughs library, and CDs containing several audiobooks. And I do not remember what they are now. So I have no idea what we're giving out for a prize, but it'll be something really cool. And so here is the question. How did Nikolai Rokoff die? And remember, to be in the running for a prize, you need to mail that to send it to Edgar's mailbag at gmail.com. That will be in the show notes, so you can find it really easy. And uh, that's it for our special features. Now so for our discussion of Tarzan the Terrible, this is, I believe it's the eighth Tarzan novel. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes, it is the eighth one. It was first serialized in 6 parts in Argosy All Story magazine in February and March of 1921. It was published as a book in June of 1921. Many people consider it one of the best Tarzan novel, and just about everybody who's read all the Tarzan novels considers it one of the best, even if it's not their absolute favorite. It is a direct sequel to Tarzan the Untamed, which involves Tarzan's activities fighting Germans in Africa during World War I, and eventually learning that his wife Jane, whom he thought was murdered by the Germans, is still alive, Tarzan the Terrible is his efforts to find her and reunite with her. And I will be doing summarizing each chapter one by one as we discuss it. As usual, I want to thank the ERB Summary Project that you can find on erblist.com, which does these chapter summaries of all of Burroughs's work, and they're an excellent resource. We do read the books ourselves, but the chapter summaries I often refer to when during these podcasts to make sure I don't leave out an important detail. And so just thank you for the great work that always goes into the summaries on ERB list. So chapter one starts off with Tarzan spotting a lion stalking someone. It's established that for 2 months, Tarzan's been looking for his lost mate, Jane, who was kidnapped by soldiers. And he's tracked her through this almost impassable swamp. He's dodged giant reptiles as he's crossed it. And now he's in a land that seems to be, rich with foliage and game. And he hears an unusual sound. And he sees a white man with a tail being pursued by a lion. So Tarzan jumps in to help. He attacks the lion. The tailed guy turns back with his club to help Tarzan. They have a fight and they kill Numa. The stranger, he notices that Tarzan's been wounded, not badly, but he is bleeding, and he dresses it with some medicinal powder that he has in his pouch. Tarzan tries to talk to the guy. He tries a number of languages and dialects, but this guy doesn't understand anything. They share a meal together, and they begin traveling together where Tarzan starts to learn the guy's language. Then it ends the next day, or the chapter ends with a cliffhanger where Tarzan's new friend is attacked by someone leaping out of the branches of a tree. So first thing I want to do when talking about chapter one is, would you say that a reader would have to read Tarzan the Untamed before this? Does chapter one give us enough information to dive into the story independently? If you saw someone holding Tarzan the Terrible and said, "Hey, I've never read a Tarzan novel, I'm going to start with this one," would you say great choice, or would you say nope, no, read Tarzan the Untamed first?
That's a very good question. Those two books do go hand in hand as I see it.
Mhm.
I would say so long as the reader is aware that Jane was announced dead and was believed to be dead in the prior book, Tarzan Untamed, as long as the reader is aware of that and understands that Tarzan's going to spend the bulk of this book looking for Jane. Of course, Tarzan generally has all kinds of adventures before he gets to the main goal of the story. And he certainly does here. But as long as the reader understands that the end result here is to find Jane and rescue her if there's anything left to rescue, I don't think they need to read the first book. Although I'd recommend the first book, prior book, Tarzan Untamed. I think it's a well written story. Go ahead.
Yeah, Scott, would you agree with that?
I would say jump into it, enjoy it.
Mhm.
While he's advancing Tarzan's movement in this chapter to the adventures that are to come, he fills in very nicely what happened in the previous book. So there should be no lack of understanding. He does it without interrupting the flow of the new story going on, but giving the foundation, the cornerstone of why what is happening at this point is happening. And I think a person could read it, and if they enjoyed it after reading the information there in the first chapter, they'd probably jump into the next book, being the previous one.
Mhm. Okay. And I actually would agree myself. I originally read these books early in high school in paperback, and I read them in order, so that was not a problem for me. But I think if I had started with Tarzan the Untamed, Tarzan the Terrible or something, I think there would have been enough explanation there to know what was going on. So I agree with that. I would recommend to somebody to read Untamed first because they go together so nicely, and I think it's a little more satisfying that way, but it's hardly a necessity.
Yeah, but
Uh,
if you love dinosaurs, you want to jump into this one.
Yes, you do. There are dinosaurs in this, and dinosaurs, as we all know, dinosaurs make everything better. So, Yeah.
I'd like to jump in with a quick comment too about Herb Zine, because you're also talking about the summary project.
Hmm.
But Herb Zine also has the pages of the Dell and Gold Key comic books out there, so you can go through them. And they took Tarzan the Terrible, and Gold Key published two comics, part one, part two, that does a really nice job of summarizing the story in comic book form. Beautiful Russ Manning art, and I think their issues 166 and 167, and 167 has one of my all-time favorite Gold Key painted covers. I think it's George Wilson, but I'm not positive. Of Tarzan
Hmm.
fighting a griff, triceratops, however you want to refer to it, in the water. And it's just a great, great image.
Yeah. Actually, it's some years ago now, but I still have it. The Tarzan the Untamed and Tarzan the Terrible with the Russ Manning art were republished, I think, by Dark Horse. I think they were doing Tarzan at the
Yeah,
time
yeah,
into a small graphic novel. So I've got it that way, and it's just I agree. The Russ Manning art is just breathtaking. Tarzan might be the most fortunate fictional character to in the artists that have attracted him than any other fictional character who's ever existed. I mean, just so many incredible artists have done him, and Russ Manning was
absolutely.
one of those. So, okay, any more comments about chapter one? I will say that it just gets us into the action really fast.
I was going to say, and do correct me if I'm wrong, because there's like three species of human beings or human-like creatures
Mhm.
introduced in this book, and I've spent the bulk of my day trying to keep them separate. So if I misstate this, please say so. But I believe the fellow there that Tarzan encountered in chapter one, and who had a med kit handy, which was fortunate,
Mhm.
was a Pithecanthropus. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it's actually the name of the chapter, and it is a reference, I think, to a species of early man.
The
But
Java man, yes.
yeah, I don't
Found in
know. Yeah,
I was just going
yeah.
to say found in Indonesia. Oh, I've got the years here somewhere. Oh, 1891 to 1892, the island of Java slash Indonesia. That's
Mhm.
the Java man or Pithecanthropus.
Yeah. And the guy we're about to meet in chapter two is also referred to as Pithecanthropus, I think. He's a different subspecies, I guess you would say, because he's part of a species that has black fur. Um, yeah, and then the third one are the creatures that seem to be more primitive, but that can ride the griffs, the dinosaurs we're going to meet soon.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Three different species of humans. And it's part of the great world building that Burroughs is going to be doing in this. In fact, I think I'll mention this now before, as we're going to see as we go through this movie, go through this novel. That's how cinematic it is in my head. Um, I think up to I was looking at Burroughs' stuff in the order they published. I think up to Tarzan the Terrible is the most sophisticated world building that he's done so far, I believe. In the complex politics he's going to put together when we're in the city of Allure, the religion and the politics clashing against each other, the motivations that the different characters have. He even mentions the art that they produce. Um, so this is great world building. It's arguably the best world building he's ever done. It's unquestionably the best world building he had done in the 10 years he'd been writing up to this point.
Well
I would
said.
also like to say I believe the narrative, his style of writing, he grew in sophistication as a writer the more he wrote.
Mhm.
But unlike some of the other novels, and I love pulp, so that's not meant to be a put down. But the last book and this book, one of each, or if they'd been published as just one giant novel, probably could be released more as a literary or contemporary novel, adventure novel, as opposed to being relegated by some people with their nose up in the air saying
Mhm.
it's pulp. The writing, the grammatical structure, and everything is incredibly strong in this
Mhm.
book.
I agree with all of that. This is this is Burroughs reaching his highest point as a writer. Not that he went downhill after this, because he wrote for 20 years after this, but This was where you can see that he's reached his peak in his skill as a writer. I think he maintained that peak through his career, but this is where you really see how good he's gotten. So anything else on chapter 1? So, okay, chapter 2, to the death. As I said, another Pithecanthropus attacks the first one. This one, though, has a shaggy coat of black hair. This guy knocks out the Tarzan's companion. They have Tarzan and he have, I think, one of the epic one of the many epic action scenes in this. This is one of the best ones. But as they fight, a saber-toothed tiger, or saber-toothed cat at least, is nearing the body of the unconscious guy. This is the one that Tarzan befriended in the previous chapter. The two stop fighting each other, and together they attack and they kill the saber-tooth. And this gets everybody to be friends. And we find out that the hairless one, the guy he met first, is named Caden, and the new guy is named Omad. They are from different tribes, and they almost get into a fight over their different religious beliefs, over whether or not God has a tail. But Tarzan just says, look, just don't argue. It's like, a family at the Thanksgiving dinner that argues about politics or religion. It's just, don't bring it up. Let's just, enjoy each other's company. And they agree to that. And they continue on with Omat leading him towards his people. And obviously by this time Tarzan has learned some of his language, and that's one thing Burroughs always manages to work into his stories, is he gives whoever his hero is, in this case Tarzan, time to learn the local language in one way or the other. And he always finds a way to do it without slowing down the story, without interfering with the pacing. There's always this time frame where Tarzan, who's really good with languages, it's part of his, I think, natural genius, is given a believable amount of time to learn the language. I also like that, the bit about him telling them just, don't kill each other over your religious differences. It's okay. Just, he doesn't disrespect either man's beliefs. He doesn't say, boy, this is dumb. He just says, no, you guys believe what you do. And and I think you're both sincere. And let's just be friends and not kill each other over this difference of opinion. He doesn't show any disrespect for their beliefs at all. He just tells them, don't stab each other to death because of them, which is reasonable. So any comments from you guys?
Well, I was just going to add that I think it's interesting and really a message to mankind, people,
Yeah.
there's bigger things in life to worry about, and there's just and the message here is this just ain't worth fighting over. And it's ironic that instead of fussing about color, these guys are fussing about God. So that's it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, what else is funny is, of course, wouldn't it be nice in these divisive times that could be just that simple? But the thing is, it really can be too, because here's a point that's easy to overlook. We're looking at the two of these species of man, however you want to refer to it, arguing against each other. But they were actually more accepting of Tarzan first than they were of each other. It just shows sometimes on how these, if you want to call it blood feuds or culture feuds or race feuds, can go so much deep, where Tarzan without a tail and being white as opposed to the hair and color they were willing to accept him before each other.
So yeah, the rest of mankind can learn something from the residents of Palo Dun, can't they? So
excuse me, I got one more thing I just want to mention before I forget it. There are a lot of prehistoric creatures that we're going to run into here, as you guys know. One of them, I don't think, let's keep our eyes open for it. I don't think we're going to see any pterodactyls or birds or bird-like creatures. I don't think so.
No, we don't.
I don't recall seeing any. And part of the reason for that I've always felt was that if there were such creatures there, they could easily fly out and get away from Paludan and go all over Africa and wreak havoc, and maybe even farther than that.
Yeah, that's true. Unless we use the continuity of the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe novels that are being currently written, where it makes Paludan and other Pellucidor and other places like that in a different dimension.
Well, that's certainly a possibility. I would agree
Yeah.
with that.
Mhm.
But at
But
least,
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's it. That was everything. I just wanted to
Okay.
point that out.
Yeah, but that makes sense. If you think of them as actual real places in our world,
Mhm.
which is the idea I still kind of like. Hey, I want to go visit Caspak one day. Caspak has the cliffs and the sudden change in temperature if you fly too high. So that makes sense. It would keep the pterodactyls there. Whereas Paludan, we see no pterodactyls, and they could fly off into regular Africa. So it kind of makes sense they don't have them, or that we would have seen them already. So
Exactly.
it's a good point. Yeah. So
So the reason I bring that up is keep your eyes open. If we see one, it's going to be a
mm,
rare sight.
that's true. Um, okay, so chapter three, we find out that the reason that Omat, the black furred guy, is away from his people is because he's in love with the girl Panat Lee, who's also desired by the chief of his tribe, Sat. And these novels, when you're reading, you don't have any problem. Tarzan Burroughs is such a cool, uh, competent storyteller that he comes up with these unusual names, and I don't think we lose track of who's who at any point. Summarizing it, I think maybe it can sound a little confusing, so I'm just gonna tell people trust us that this is that when you're reading this, these names are all go to the characters correctly, and you never get confused. But the chief is Essat, who also desires Panat Lee. So Omat's been sent away. Um, and the scene switches to their I'm going to say village, but they're caves in the side of a cliff, and they're expert climbers, and they can use their tail to climb too. So they have they're the dark furred species here live in cliffside caves where you have to climb up to get to your cave. Um, he tries to take her by force. This is Essat trying to take Pan Lee by short sword. She clobbers him, knocks him unconscious, and then makes a run for it. She flees into the jungle. Um, and in the darkness, she spots what's probably one of the lions, and she jumps off to get away. She jumps off the rim of a cliff, and that's where this chapter ends as far as his story is concerned. But in the meantime, Omat, Tadan, and Tarzan arrive there. Omat climbs to Panat Lee's cave, um, but he gets into a fight with Esat, and the fight soon ends with Esat dead, and Omat is now the chieftain, but his girlfriend is missing. So that's chapter three. And I got to say that Panat Lee, who is a key character for several chapters, she goes into the background later on in the story. But she gets a pretty awesome introduction when she knocks out Essat and escapes. She just shows her to be capable and brave. And I think it's kind of too bad. It's not really a criticism of the novel, but I kind of missed her as being a major character later on when she becomes kind of a background character later in the novel. Um, so comments from you guys?
Well, a couple things. Panat Lee, there is a Joe Jusko trading card set issued around 1996, give or take, and I oftentimes will use the images from that set and post and discussions in my Facebook discussion group. Um, but there's an image, there's a drawing there of Panat Lee, which I think does a very good justice from
Hmm.
Jusko. The other thing regarding, you're very correct about the going up and down the side of the buildings or the homes or whatever with the footholds, that kind of thing. There's
Hmm.
also a network of pegs there, and those pegs are removable, presumably, if you want some privacy or don't want to be bothered by people who might be coming up to get you. You can remove the pegs. That's going to, at the very least, slow them down. So, and as I
Yeah.
recall, later on, we should see this here in the story someplace. Um, the natives there are impressed with Tarzan's ability to go up and down. He may not be as fast as they are because they have a tail. He doesn't, and they use that tail to go up and down the side of the buildings. Um, but they're impressed that with no tail, he can still go up and down pretty good. All right, that's
Mhm.
it.
Yep. Scott, any comments from you?
Just go along with what you guys are saying about the characters here and stuff. It's a little sidetracked. When Jess mentioned about the cards, I'm checking something on here. So if I find what I'm looking for, I'll let you know after the next chapter.
Okay. Yeah, the cover of the new edition of this for the authorized library also has Panat Lee on the front. It's when she and Tarzan are treed by a griff. So we get another image of her there.
Beautiful painting too.
Oh, it
sure
is. Yeah.
And also on that note, the griffs, and Burroughs went into detail on the color scheme for the griffs.
Mm-hmm.
The griffs properly done are very colorful creatures. I mean, they're going to stand out in the crowd. That's the way Burroughs designed them. And to that point, the cover for this the new book, the new cover, ERB Authorized Library book cover for this edition nails that cover, that color, that color scheme.
Yeah. And it's not surprising that Joe Jusko gets every detail right because the guy is incredible. Does. The guy is incredible. Okay, chat.
I didn't find one thing I'm looking for, but at this point, let me see if I can. Not sure if I can get the camera on there or not.
For those of you listening to our entirely audio podcast, Scott is showing Jess and I his sheets of the original Joe Jusko cards.
Might you be able to include this on the post?
Yeah, I might be able to.
Yeah, here's if my finger's in the right place. That sounds bad. There's one of his paintings. This is an uncut pressing of the cards.
That's awesome to have. I have that set of cards, but
which, there's also on the back they have information about about it too. But I was looking for the one if this was a set that Jess was talking or not. But
yes,
I could take a picture of this and send it to you if you want to include this slide.
And I'll include a picture in the notes so that people can see what we were looking at.
That is a really neat collectible, though. I'd imagine a very rare one too. So that's a great thing to have.
Cool.
I picked it up at the ERB convention in Minneapolis in 2012.
Well done. Good move.
I agree. Okay, chapter 4 is Tarzan Jad Garu is the name of the title. That is the title of the chapter. That means Jad Garu means the terrible. So Tarzan the Terrible. This is the nickname he's going to earn. This is where the title of the book comes from. People are going to be calling him Tarzan the Terrible because he is just so epic in a battle. And the events of the chapter have Omat is now chief, but the people are demanding that Tarzan and Tadan be turned over to be killed. But Omat refuses. He sticks up for his friends, and he basically says, "I'm in charge. They're going to be okay." Tarzan picks up Panat Lee's scent. So Tarzan and Omat and Tadan and a couple of other warriors go and search for her. And using just his tracking skills, he leads them to the spot where Panat Lee had leaped off the cliff into waters below to escape the lion. And just then a lion comes and it attacks. Tarzan slays it, which, they just think is epic. And then they see Panat Lee's father and his two brothers being pursued by warriors of another tribe. This is another tribe of the dark furred guys, but they're not a unified culture. They have different tribes that often fight each other. So a battle ensues, and one of the guys runs off to get help, get reinforcements. But the enemy, the other tribe, lures Tarzan into an ambush. And he gets a lot of them before he goes down, but he's just overwhelmed by numbers, and he's captured. So that it ends with the good guys have not yet found Panat Lee. They don't even know for sure if she's alive, and he has been captured by an opposing tribe. So this is a chapter. Really, I like this because it shows us how epic Tarzan's fighting skills are, but also reminds us that he's not invulnerable. You can overwhelm him with numbers, or you can get lucky, or he's never completely safe. We kind of get to where, he's killing another lion. He's done that 100 times, but it's dangerous every time. And here, just because he's outnumbered, he gets knocked out and captured. And it's a good reminder that he is like he's Tarzan. He's pretty epic, but he can be killed. He is the dangers he faces are real dangers. Comments from you guys?
Well, this reminds me of Tarzan getting overwhelmed by the Ant-Man, where he misjudged their ability to
Hmm.
take
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
a taller obstacle, a bigger obstacle, and
Hmm.
they had him all wrapped up pretty quick before he knew what
Yeah.
was going
His
on.
his own overconfidence got him that time.
Exactly.
So yeah.
That's enough for me. Go ahead.
Hmm. Any comments
Yeah, and
from
I'd also agree with what both you said here, but to add on the fact that the slaying of the lion,
Mhm.
basically by himself as opposed to the other people who were with him, and then even though he's overwhelmed, the respect he gets from the enemy by the name that they call him Jadguru or the Terrible. So Tarzan the Terrible, out of respect, you can fight against somebody. Doesn't mean you can't respect who they are.
Mhm. Okay, in chapter 5, this actually cuts away from the scene for a while. It goes back to the swamps surrounding Paludan, and we meet a guy who's trying to cross, who's dressed, in nothing but a loincloth, and he's got a knife. He's also got an Enfield rifle and several and a belt of cartridges. In fact, a belt and two shoulder straps of cartridges. So he's got plenty of ammo. But he's not using the rifle as a weapon to protect himself. Um, he's trying to get through the swamp, but no, but at this point we don't know who he is or what his mission is. In the meantime, we go back to Panat Lee, who jumped off the cliff, but he landed in the water. She swam ashore, and now she's just trying to find food. And while she's hiding, she sees men being chased, but there's no way of knowing that the guy being chased is her father along with her two brothers. She finds a long abandoned cave. She uses this as a refuge. She's really, I mean, we get an impression that she knows how to take care of herself. But one night when she's sleeping in the cave, this creature approaches her. Um, and then we cut away from her because Burroughs is always good at cliffhangers. We go back to Tarzan, who wakes up in a cave with his hands tied. Um, there's one guy left to guard him, which is I think it's always a mistake to leave one guy behind to guard Tarzan because he manages to work his way out of his bonds with his teeth, and he kills his guard, and then kind of a reminder that he's not a completely civilized guy, that he's never been completely civilized. His sense of humor comes back up, and in this case, it takes a form of him beheading, cutting off the head of the guy he just killed, and taking that with him. And he's going to do something that he thinks is funny to mess with his enemies with it. Um, but but as he nears some caves later on, um, he picks up Panat Lee's scent again, and the chapter ends with him hearing a cry of fear from somebody. So that's chapter 5. I do not remember now when I read this if I guessed right away that that was Korak that we see at the beginning. Do you guys have any? I mean, we've all been reading Burroughs for decades, so do you guys remember when first time you read this, whenever, if you guessed that was, if you knew that was Korak right away?
That is a very good question. Very good question.
Mm.
And this is one of the books. Let's see, my formal is not the right word, but my serious reading of Tarzan began in 1967, reading The Return of Tarzan. Now, at what point I read this book, I don't recall, but I did not read them in order. I was limited by whatever was found on the spinner rack.
Yeah.
So it's possible that I read this book prior to the earlier book on the list of books of this.
Okay.
No, I did not. I'm confident I did not know it was Korak until he revealed himself later on.
Yeah, I just wonder what readers in 1921 who had been reading Tarzan and knew who Korak was, whether they how many of them guessed, oh, it's got to be Korak.
Well, that's an interesting question, but I would point out that most of those readers were reading these things for the first time.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing to keep someone from coming in and picking up a Tarzan Tarzan, Tarzan the Terrible book, and not having read any of the other books prior to that, that could have happened.
Yeah, I mean, this question would only apply to those who have been reading, who've been following Tarzan in order as they've been reading,
Right.
you know. And I cannot remember, I was what, 13 years old maybe, whether I guessed it was Korak or just wondered who the heck this guy was.
But
Or,
even if the reader figures it out immediately, I still think it's a very nice touch.
oh, it is.
And it reminds me of some of these books. Every once in a while, a lion will roar in the distance, usually the last sentence in a given chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And then right when you need help, or when Tarzan needs help, and he does on occasion, here comes Jad Balja in to save the day. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the lion we heard roaring earlier.
Yeah. Um, well, I have got to say that I remember one thing about reading this, and that was I was reading the paperbacks that came out in the 70s. Was that Valentine? I can't remember who it was.
Valentine, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember, it's clearly the date of what, 1911 and 1912 is clearly stated in Tarzan of the Apes.
Mm.
And then in Son of Tarzan, his kid grows up and becomes an adult. I wasn't looking at original copyright dates if they were even in the Ballantine books. So I was just assuming, okay, so now we have to be in the late 20s at least, 1920s.
Right.
And when Jules of Opar, when I read that one and he lost his Tarzan lost his fortune at the beginning, he found out he was broke. I was thinking, wow, maybe that's the Great Depression. That would explain that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to the World War one, and I probably thought it might be a flashback story. Then Korak shows up, and this was my introduction to the Great Korak time discrepancy.
Right.
And I realized it was the discrepancy right away. I just, wait a minute, Korak, is he even born yet? No, he's got to be like 4 years old at this point. What's going on here? And then I just realized that Burroughs wasn't that worried about the time frame. He just wanted to tell a good story.
Right.
And well, whether he realized it or not, he started decades of debates about how you explain the Great Korak time discrepancy.
Well, that's certainly true. I will add that there are some theories out about that time discrepancy thing.
Mm-hmm.
That issue will be addressed in one of the upcoming ERB Universe books.
I think is Korak at the Earth's core out yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one where I haven't read it yet. I'm going to, but I haven't. I think
It's the first one of a trilogy.
okay, and they're going to explain, which I think is going to probably be interdimensional travel of some sort. But they did say they were going to come up with their explanation for the discrepancy in that.
I was talking to Win, maybe I'm going to say about 2 years ago. We were having lunch with some other people, and he obviously didn't want to give away too much, but he says, I think we're onto something here that's going to settle and take care of this once and for all. So I'm
Okay.
really excited about that.
Yeah.
That's just going to get explored.
There might be a smaller time discrepancy here, because Tarzan the Untamed starts when Germans destroy his estate in Africa and kidnap Jane. And when the Germans first arrived there, Jane didn't know the war had started. So it's got to still be August of 1914, where she hasn't gotten word yet that the war has started. So Tarzan thinks she's dead. He does some stuff to fight the Germans, and then he has his adventure with Bertha and the pilot whose name I'm forgetting, which probably takes some months. And then it takes a couple of months for them to get to track her to Palo Don. But Korak here, he's mentioned it later in the novel that Tarzan said the last time I heard of him, he was fighting in the Somme. So he was a soldier in France, which is great. But if he's out of the army, finding his kid, does that mean the war's over and somehow 5 years have gone by? Or do you think he got like special permission to go find his dad because his dad's a lord?
Well, in the first chapter, it says Tarzan's been on Jane's trail for 2 months now.
Yeah.
So the war was still going on at that point.
Yeah. So if you just go from the most amount of time that you can get from the beginning of Tarzan the Untamed to here, it can't be 5 years. It can't be 1919 with Korak released out of the army after the war ends. But he's out of the army, So, and then when they get back in Tarzan at the beginning of Tarzan, the Golden Lion, there's no reference to the war. They just say, "Oh, let's rebuild our bungalow and restart our lives."
Yeah,
so.
the Enfield rifle is what threw me off.
Mm,
I'm a Korak fan. We all kind of have our favorites. Korak's one of mine,
mm.
and I think at the time it's sort of like, oh, loincloth and stuff that could be Korak, but he's in France and or I didn't even correlate that. I'm just
Yeah.
like, he wouldn't need to carry a rifle. God,
Mm.
forgetting Tarzan used a machine gun in the previous book.
Yes. So
Re-
yeah, neither Tarzan nor Korak would turn down using a weapon if it was the tactically intelligent thing to do at any
They're
time.
all for smart fighting.
Yes.
Even
yeah,
even
yeah.
even I like the fight in the first chapter with the
Mm.
lion when things are happening so fast. Tarzan wasn't given a chance to come up with a strategy on how is it best to do the lion, where he might
Mm.
wait or trap him. Is like he just dove in head first.
Yeah.
But he acknowledges normally Tarzan would want to put a strategy forth. So it's
Hmm.
smart fighting. It's not
Yeah.
just compulsive or
No, it's not just scream and leap. It's like
yeah.
let's do this in an intelligent way. Yeah.
Regarding your question about the timing, I've always had the impression, keyword there's impression,
Mm.
that the war was over and the Korok left immediately, or left the battlefront as soon as he had permissions,
Hmm.
and was making his way back home and went looking for his parents. You know what prompt? Well, he talked. I'm sure he talked to the Wazari, who told him everything they knew about the situation. And
Hmm.
then being jungle bred, more or less himself, he started tracking them, and he was enchanted with that rifle, so he took it with him, which is a very good thing. Maybe one of the smartest things a person's ever done.
Uh,
But I've always felt, anyhow, my point is I've always felt that the war was over with, but I need to confirm that if
yeah.
I read that
That
somewhere.
well, when Burroughs wrote it, the war was over with, and he was, but
Isn't there
um,
a segment in Untamed where Tarzan also says is not sure where Korak is? He'd like to get word to him, but didn't know if it would get through and maybe sent it. Is there a part where he tried to send some kind of message in the hope that
I
Korak
don't.
might get it?
I
And
would.
since
I
they are
would.
people of privilege, maybe he would be able to get excused from the battlefront.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't remember them mentioning Korak because that was one of the things I was wondering about when he says, "Oh, Jane's dead. I'm going to abandon civilization." Is like, oh, don't you want to say bye to your son?
Hmm. I
But
had that thought too.
yeah. So I don't think they mentioned Korak at Untamed, but I may be wrong.
I thought
But
there's somewhere earlier in it, but
yeah.
I could be
But yeah,
misremembering.
but we know, I mean, it's mentioned he was getting information to help him find Jane from British intelligence. So he also could
Yeah.
have said to somebody, "Oh, what's going on with my son? Oh, he's serving in the Somme." So there you
That
are.
that could have been off camera and we wouldn't
Yeah,
even have seen it.
yeah. But it just means if the war is over at this point, that means poor Jane has been a prisoner for or wandering in the jungle after escaping the Germans for 4 years. So, but she's tough, as we'll see when we get to her scenes later on.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
time moves different in Peladon.
Maybe it does.
That may be the
Uh,
solution right there.
Yeah. So anyway, and Burroughs was quite correct in not worrying about the flow of time and coming up with an exact chronology because why interfere with a great story that way? Um, but it does, those of us who like to talk about it and examine it, it's a question, how much time has gone by and how long was Jane a prisoner and all of that. And the answers I think are a little unclear.
I was
I,
like when my friends and I are watching shows like Star Trek, going, "How could this happen?" It's like it's in the script.
Yes. Well, I'll go on a tangent in a minute because I have to because I'm a Trekkie. In the first season of Star Trek, there's 4 or 5 episodes where they make aliens with godlike powers, and all
Yeah.
of them are great episodes in of themselves. But they're surprised every single time they meet an alien with godlike powers. It's like you just met one last week. Good heavens,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah, and Methuselah, and
Yeah, yeah.
but it's all part of that Q continuum.
Well, the who is it? The Squire of Gothas, that guy,
Yeah,
Trelane. There's a
Yeah.
novel. It's not canon, but there's a novel by Peter David where they say he's part of the Q continuum, and with that's
Yes.
reasonable.
yeah.
So, um, so those are good. That's good fan theories. But anyway, sorry about the tangent. Anyway, we're unclear as to what year this is taking place in. And Korak, he wouldn't have deserted, but he might have gotten special permission to leave the front to go find his dad. That's not unreasonable.
One other point, real quick, on this chapter too, is, and we talked about it in the last book, and it's come up several times. We forget how savage Tarzan can be. He'll use corpses or beheadings and stuff because he knows it will instill fear, or as they call him, the trickster, doing stuff to confuse or scare the enemy. And he's not. He grew up in the jungle, animals killing each other every day, part of survival or part of wildlife and being beast. So to him, it's not, let's say, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Means meet the end.
A natural way of life.
Yeah, and I agree. And his sense of humor does come up in a way that, like, he enjoys tormenting his enemies, and they're always bad guys. He never torments innocent people, but that's part of his upbringing as a in the savage jungle. Is his sense of humor takes those routes. So I'm going to take this guy's head. That's a good laugh.
It sounds like Mangani humor there.
It does. It really does.
This is a little offbeat, but relates to it. When I was living over in South Korea, and I was at the zoo in Seoul, and I was in the primate and grade ape house, and they're on the inside as opposed to outside, where I watched for like an hour and a half because it's just fascinating. Off to the side, huge, I don't know, I'm going to say 5.5, 6 foot gorilla, which means he was just about as broad as, this is a big fella. And he would set up on this corner lodge like he was doing nothing at all. And he'd wait like up to 15 minutes till there's a new group of people pressing up against the glass. And then you go, jump right at him, hit the glass, and watch him screaming away. And he's like, it was insane. I couldn't pull myself off to the side to watch him do it over and over again. He was planning it. He was scaring him. He's getting a kick out of it. Whatever. I wish I'd had cell phones with video at the time.
So it's that just reinforces the idea that his sense of humor comes from the Manganis, which probably had a brutal sense of humor. So, okay, should we move on to chapter 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this takes us back to Panat Lee, who's attacked by a beast called the Torudun, a beast-like man that I'm thinking of as kind of Neanderthal level, or maybe even a little below that. And this beast man has got her, but then Tarzan shows up. There's a fight. Tarzan kills the bad guy. He speaks to her in her own language. He tells her that he's a friend of Omat. She comes to trust him very quickly. Just her instincts say this is a good guy. And then he tells her that Omat has killed Esat, the bad chief, and that they're cool to go home. And then they switch back to the character we know is Korak, who's crossing the swamps, and he gets into a fight with a big reptile, or he's being attacked by a big reptile, but we cut away from that. And then we go back to Tarzan, because once again, the pacing is great. He is just giving us these little mini cliffhangers constantly by switching to someone else and then switching back again. He goes down and he hunts a deer, but he finally sees a griff. He's caught glimpses of these things before, but what it is a giant multicolored triceratops that's charging him. And Panat Lee arrives with him, and the two are trapped in a tree by the griff. And I should say that this is a carnivorous triceratops, and that Tarzan does note that triceratops were supposed to be herbivores, but apparently over the years, or over the millennia or eons, the griffs have evolved into a carnivorous creature. And the chapter ends with Tarzan and Panat Lee trapped in a tree by one of these things. So this is our first really good look at a griff. And I do like that, he acknowledges that it was a herbivore once, but it's just changed over the years. And he's come up with a really cool monster because of that. Any comments from you guys?
I would suggest that the animal, the griff, adapted.
Okay.
For whatever reason, maybe, that looks to be a pretty lush area that he's living in there based on the descriptions we've seen. But for whatever reason, he may have found people to be tasty or more filling. I don't know. But my point is that for some reason the creature has decided to adapt, or maybe it's a branch of the Griffs that never made it out to real civilization, and we're stuck there in
Okay.
Paludan since day one, perhaps.
I just pictured two Griffs in an old Miller Lite commercial arguing, tastes great, less filling.
That's great. I
Okay.
think you got something there. I wish I thought of that. Real quick, while I have the floor, but I can't top that. But real quick, one of my favorite reference books is the Burroughs Cyclopedia. That's Cyclo, C-Y, Cyclopedia by Clark A. Brady. And I looked up the Taurodon in that, which was the creature that you mentioned a moment ago. And this is all based on Burroughs stuff. So meaning that that this should be stated someplace in the book itself, because they would not do lose some accuracy here. It says the Taurodon is a large, hairy-tailed creature of a slightly higher level of development than the great apes. Now, I always think of the great apes being the Mangani. I always think of them as being the missing link that Darwin had proposed. So this character is just a notch above the Mangani. Although this creature, this Taurodon, I would say is a short supply, because that's the only one. Paludan there is the only area that we've ever heard of him being in. And again, this is all fictional world, I realize.
Okay.
But that's it. That's enough for me.
Well, the Taurodons are tool using, at least in that they carry a stick to hit the Griffs in the nose with in order to tame them.
Yes.
So that and being able to tame an animal at all, even if they're just barely tamed, are two things that a Mangani couldn't do. So it does put them a notch above.
Right. I would not see a Mangani doing that. Although I will say, think about this. It's in the ERB webcomics, and this is a totally different platform. The ERB webcomics, where Nekima is acquainted with the Griff, and uses a stick to guide the Griff around because he sees other people doing it.
Yeah.
That's almost a different. Well, it's a different platform, as I said. Go ahead. I'm done.
Okay, Scott, any comments from you?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the idea that they may have evolved or adapted where they might become, carnivores or meat eaters. But it also crossed my mind that, a hippo is a plant eater, is a herbivore, but they will attack, and they're like most dangerous animal in Africa, kill more people every year than that. Not necessarily eat them, but for defense and territory. And they get in their mouth, it's almost like they are eating you, but you're dead.
Yeah.
There's some powerful jaws on those creatures. That's exactly right.
I remember reading somewhere, and I can't remember where. So if it might be on the internet, so it must be true. I can't remember. I can't remember if this is legit or not. If we have a listener who knows, please leave a comment to correct me if this isn't true. But I read once that on occasion you will see a herbivore like a deer or something, if it comes across the body of another animal, it will eat some of it. So that most herbivores are only like 99% herbivores. When the opportunity to eat meat comes up, they don't do it very often, and they don't need to live, but they won't turn down meat. So
especially if they're starving.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're open-minded?
They're open-minded, yes. So anyway, if anyone listening can correct that if it's wrong, I can't remember at all where I read it. And so I might have read it in a novel somewhere, and it was just what the writer was doing to build the story. I have no idea.
Even if it's on the internet, it might not be true. But if it's all things Edgar Rice Burroughs, it is true.
Well, there we go. So, okay, what are we up to? We're up to chapter 7, right? Junglecraft is the name. So Tarzan and Panat try to get away from the Griff by just going from tree to tree, but the Griff keeps following them. They can't climb down without getting eaten. Then one of the Taurodon show up, and using a particular cry, wee-oh, and I don't know what the intonation or the pitch was, but it calls the Griff and actually, climbs on top of it and can obviously ride it. Tarzan notes this, and he notes the cry and all that, but he then uses it. We're talking about his intelligent fighting. He just shoots the Taurodon with an arrow, and that's done with that guy. The Griff, they still have to deal with the Griffs. But he tells Panat to return to her home. and he cuts himself a staff because he saw the Toradon whack the griff, and he just goes down to it. He repeats the cry and whacks it in the nose, and he's able to tame it. In the meantime, Pan Lee gets back to her, is trying to get back to her home. She meets a score of Hodon warriors. These are the guys that come from the white furless humans of this land. They capture her, and they're heading for Allure, the city of light, the place where the white version of the people here live. In the meantime, Omat is bemoaning the loss of his friend. He thinks that Tarzan must be dead and Pan Atlee must be dead. So poor Omat's having a bad day. So that is chapter 7. When we record part 2 of this novel and we get to where we're giving out the Bertha Kitchener Award for Best Action Scene, that's one of the ones I'm going to nominate. Them climbing through the trees, trying to get rid of the griff, and then Tarzan coming down to tame it, even if he doesn't know it'll work, I think might be more suspenseful than actiony, but I think it's still a superbly done scene. Any comments from you guys?
I would love to see a scene like that in a movie to see how that unfolds. But just playing it in my mind's movie theater, that sounds pretty exciting, I think.
It does.
And it's risky too, as we've already established.
It is, and even, as we'll see, even when he tames the griff, he's never has it 100% under control. These are really bad-tempered creatures.
There's no brakes on this thing.
No, there's not.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Any comments from you about this chapter, Scott?
Yeah, I'd go along with it and would discuss the winner of the award or however at the end of the thing. But it has two great moments in here. Korak in his battle, which is, fighting dinosaurs. How about that? And then taming dinosaurs is really cool. And you're right, the narrative lasts longer, and the suspense of the encounter with the griff and before and after, several times without the book, where he draws the scene out as more of the chase or the escape or the strategy is very well done.
So, I agree completely. Also, what we've discussed so far, when our next episode, when we finish this novel, the fight between Tarzan and Omat in chapter 2 is going to be another of my nominees. And then we're coming to chapter 8, where another nomination for best action scene is going to be Korak's encounter with a giant hissing reptile, which is not described in detail. I picture it as a giant crocodile, like the prehistoric Dinosaurus. But it's not described in a lot of detail. That's just how I was picturing it in my head. But the Korak is attacked. Once again, he's not described as Korak. He's just referred to as the stranger or the man. But he still refuses to use his rifle. I don't know if his rifle would have stopped this thing, but he dives underneath it when it's charging him and slits its belly open as he goes under it in order to do away with it. And he finally gets to land. He uses the dry grass, to clean his rifle, keeps that in good shape. And he just continues, whatever his quest is. We know, of course, that he's Korak and his quest is finding his mom and dad, but that's not specifically stated yet. Anyway, we go back to Tarzan, who's now riding the griff. And it takes him back to when he first rode Tantor the elephant as a kid. It brings back kind of nice memories. And he wants to go to Elur, the city of the Hodon, on the back of the griff. And a party of Hodon look at him in just complete shock. And then they just run away from him. Tarzan kills a deer. He eats some of it. He feeds the rest of the griff. Eventually, he approaches the city. He's spotted, and they're calling out, "No tail, no tail." And Tarzan adapts what I'm going to call his God gambit. I'm stealing that phrase from a science fiction novel, and I'll explain that in a moment. But he claims to be the son of the great god, and he demands to see Khotan, the king. Um, and that the God Gamut is something, if you've ever read Ringworld by Larry Niven, the main characters in that crash in the ring world, the giant artificial world, find that civilization has collapsed, and they survive with each tribe they meet by pretending to be God and using their advanced technology to be gods and using their advanced technology to prove that they're gods. So that's where the term God Gambit comes from. And I want to say that I think ERB is criticizing religions that oppress people. But later on, both he and Jane have references where they refer to God and imply that they believe in God. So I don't believe that he's making an all-encompassing criticism of religious beliefs. I believe he is criticizing the sort of pagan religions that overtly oppress people and practice things like human sacrifices. I think that's where his criticism lies. I will say, as a Christian, I have never been offended by by either this or by the Mastermind of Mars, which has similar things happening. I just don't get offended by it because I see it as a criticism of religions that hurt people. Anyway, comments from you guys?
I would call those false religions.
Yeah, I would too.
And that's all
Yeah,
I
I agree
for the moment.
with
Go
that.
ahead.
Mhm.
No, I was just saying, agree with what you said about that, and the way he handles it as personal beliefs and not necessarily challenging one or the other. And
Mhm.
I've never felt an offense on anything he's written myself.
Yeah, I agree completely. And also, we once again see how smart Tarzan is in figuring out how to control a griff, and making it his mount for a couple of days and keeping it around by feeding it. So Tarzan always knows this is a bizarre situation. Suddenly he has a dinosaur for a mount, and he's not phased at all. He just calmly thinks, okay, how do I tame this thing? And now that I've tamed it, how do I keep it with me? And just acts with intelligence, constantly. So,
Well, I think you can say he has a way with animals, but there's more to it than that.
mhm.
And there's a technique and an approach to it, and uh, and Tarzan's been around wild animals all of his life. Needless to say, grew up with
Mhm.
them. So he's picked up various approaches along the way, and obviously has it working. Granted, again, we're talking about a fictional character, I realize, but sure is fun to believe he's a real thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. Um, okay, so yeah, Scott, any comments from you about this chapter other than
Nothing
what we
more to
already
add
talked
on
about?
this one, no.
Okay. Well, chapter 9, um, Tarzan is posing as the god's son. Dor Ul Otho is his name as the son of God. And he is, because he's tailless, and the version of religion here among the Hodan is that the God has no tail. So he's able to say, hey, I have no tail. Obviously, I'm the son of God. He meets Khotan, who's skeptical of his claims, but he also just doesn't want to take any chances. Um, but Tarzan just compliments the guy. He's playing him basically. He's playing politics here by just saying, "Hey, you're Khotan. My dad thinks you're the best king ever." And so Khotan accepts him because of that. He resumes the business of the court. He presides over a dispute involving Jaden, who is the father of Tarzan's friend Taden, who we last saw still with Omat's people. Um, and then, Khotan takes Tarzan to visit the temple. And here we meet Ludon, the high priest, who doubts Tarzan's status as the son of God. And we're going to learn very quickly that Lodon is just a power-hungry hypocrite who just wants to use the religion to hold power and eventually wants to overthrow Khotan as king and just take over. Um, they see a room where captives are being held for sacrifice, and Tarzan just says, "Nope, sacrifices are bad. I'm the son of God. You can't do that. Let them all go." And so that is chapter 9. Any comments from you guys about it?
I think Allure is called the City of Light, but I don't think that they ever explain what makes it where that name comes from.
I
Did
would,
you recall?
I don't think they do, but I would assume it's probably more artificial lighting that is visible from a distance than you would get in the caves of the other race in Paladun. So maybe it's that.
That sounds good to me.
If there was an explanation, I missed it.
Well, so did I. All
Mhm.
right, that's all for me.
Okay, Scott, any comments?
I think it's a smart part on Tarzan's thing where he meets them on a common ground on what he might consider, what to him is a false or a power driven hierarchy or religion
Hmm.
to come in and take on the identity as he identifies himself there to the king, but does that in a manner to praise and uplift the king so that it's not seen as a challenge, but gives him an ego boost. And we
Hmm.
know lots of leaders like ego boosts.
Yeah, they all do. So, yeah, but yeah, and it's just once again, it's a sign of Tarzan's intelligence and his own sophistication that he realizes, I got to play politics here. I can't just scream and leap again. I have to actually do this intelligently, because his main purpose here isn't to fight everybody. It's to find if out if Jane's around and get her back.
And I
So,
think too, it shows his growth having, if he'd never gone to England, France, America, if he'd never
mhm,
left the area of Africa he grew up in, he wouldn't be aware of these things. But his observation of human nature and what he sees as lies and betrayal that individuals use to advance themselves as human society, and he goes, really, when people are acting this way, who really are the so-called beasts or animals? So I
mhm,
think he's taken these lessons he's learned and to apply it in this situation.
I agree.
I would like to add to that, although I think you guys really already beat me to it and covered it very well. My point is, it takes a lot of guts to walk into some place where you don't know anybody, and
Mhm,
hopefully they don't know you, and proclaim yourself for God and say, "This is how things are going to be done." And you don't do that, but you ought to be doing this, and stand there with some confidence and just dare them to disagree with you.
mhm,
And I think, of course, again, this is fictional, but still, it's fun to ponder. And part of that is Tarzan has always been a good observer from day one, and a good mimicker from day one, and confidence. And he's got the horsepower within. He's got the strength to back up whatever he says. He's got friends he can call on if he needs to. But my point is, it takes a special kind of person, I think, to go to that level where you can say, "This is what we're going to do because I am the big guy." Go ahead.
yeah. No, and I agree with all of that. This was an extraordinarily gutsy move, and Tarzan's one of the just a character you can believe could pull this off. That he would have not just the courage and the intelligence, but also the guts to do it. Um, because I'd be sweating if I were up there between each other. By the
That's
way,
exactly where I was coming from.
I'm
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
By the way, I'm a deity. Do you mind? Would you mind, please, if I just let your human sacrifices go and all of that? Now he just ordered it. So. Um, Yeah, and so in chapter 10, and this is the last chapter we're going to discuss in this part, chapter 2 will drop hopefully within a week or so. Part 2 will drop hopefully within a week or so. But we'll be ending tonight with a look at this chapter, the Forbidden Garden. Um, Lodan the priest dislikes letting everybody go, and he still doubts Tarzan, but he can't do anything about it now. He has to agree to this. Um, Tarzan notices a building where the windows and the doors are barred, but when he asks, Loden says, "Oh, that building's empty." And I think every reader reading that knows that he's lying. There's a banquet that night in which there's a lot of gluttony and drinking, but Tarzan refuses to participate in that. He's going to keep his head. I don't think Tarzan ever got drunk. Um, he, you know,
Oh, he
he,
did. He did in one of the Jungle Tales as a
oh,
kid.
he did as a kid, yes. And then he learned his lesson, didn't he? So, so he's spotted by a slave, a Wasdun slave. The Wasduns are the dark-furred ones who live outside. He's spotted by someone who saw him in that initial battle where he was first captured. Um, and then that guy was later captured and brought to Allure as a slave. So this guy tells Loden, who promises his freedom if and a lot of gifts if all this turns out to be true. Then we jump back to Korak. Um, who's just still making his way into Paludan. Then we jump back again to Tarzan. He's led to an apartment. He looks through the window. He leaves through the window to explore. Um, he spots Panat Lee, who is now a slave of Ulo Ah, the daughter of Khotan the king. And this is the woman that Taydun, his friend, loves. Um, so he tells her that Taydun is safe, and that he's a guest of Omat out, away from the city. Um, and he tells her to free Panat Lee and allow her to return to her people. And he asks if there's any strangers in Allure. He's still looking for Jane. Ulo. That's a difficult name to say. She tries to avoid answering the question. And he just demands in the name of Jad Ben Otho, their name for God, and he's about to tell him what's going on when Khotan, the king, enters the garden, and he leaves. He says, this is a proscribed area. I got to take you away. And uh, oh, the chapter ends with the king getting a message from Lodan the priest that wants to see him in the temple alone. So we get a hint here that Jane is around. They even, people avoiding the question, are there any other strangers here? And nobody wants to tell him. And I think that's a pretty broad hint for the readers that Jane's going to pop up in Alert before too long. But we see what we mentioned about the last chapter, that the Tarzan is playing this part to the hilt, showing complete confidence and just saying things with the assumption that people are going to obey him. Although we know that Lodan also already has reason to doubt who he is. And so, but at the moment, he's just still going with the God Gambit. Any comments from you guys?
Well, now that you've made it through that chapter, I will suggest that I would call that name of the Hodan woman Oloa.
Oloa, I think that works. I think I was trying to complicate the pronunciation too much. Oloa
I,
makes perfect sense.
I recognize because I complicate things all the time. I don't need.
Yeah.
Or you could click the last part. Oh, look, not really. No, I think Aloha, what Jess said is
Yeah.
probably it. It looks like you emphasize the O and then the
Mhm.
other two. Because I think if it was Oloa, you'd probably have it as a capitalized A.
Yeah. And one thing I'm going to add is Tarzan learns more, or we learn more. Yeah, Tarzan learns more about the tension between the king and the priest here. And this is where I think we really start to see how sophisticated the world building is here. Because you have all these various factions of Paludan civilization. They're clashing over political and religious differences. All this rings true to human nature and human history. And his Burroughs' storytelling skills is so much that he's giving us a potentially complicated plot, but readers are going to be able to follow this without trouble because he explains everything so clearly and so well. Um, yeah. So, any comments from you guys before we call it an episode?
I was going to add one more thing that I meant to mention earlier. In preparing for our discussion tonight, I was looking through the Tarzan novels of Edgar Rice Burroughs by David A. Ullery, another of my favorite reference books. And in discussing this story, he points out that the big question in Paludan, the thing that gets people riled up, and the thing they're very passionate about, is whether it's not color, it's not how you comb your fur or anything like that. It's whether or not God has a tail. That's the thing. That's the thing that they're willing to fight over. Um, some people believe he doesn't have a tail. Some people believe he does have a tail. Now, how you don't prove that, I'm not sure. But until Tarzan comes along and says, "I'm God," that may resolve it, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But I just that even though again a fictional story, but that just I think it shows how upset people can get over something that does it really matter?
Yeah, it's not a spiritually important point. We run into that because I teach the Bible on missionary church trips, and I sometimes have given the Wednesday night sermons at a church, and so I'm something of a biblical scholar, and I know that sometimes there's legitimate, intelligent discussions about people who have different opinions about some things
Mhm.
that edify everybody because they respectfully discuss it. And then there's times where people just get up on their high horse and it becomes a senseless argument that does no good at all. and does nothing to support each other's faith. And that's part of human nature. So I can completely believe a civilization getting into a tizzy over whether or not God has a tail, even though it shouldn't be a spiritually important part of their religious beliefs. It could be something they just debate for fun and then find out one day in the afterlife who's right.
Right.
So it is, yeah, it is a commentary on the worst aspects of human nature that is completely believable, that they would be getting on each other's nerves over whether, over something like that.
There's more important things to argue about. Or
There
just,
are. There definitely
all
are.
right. Well, you stated that very well. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I want to add on here. This chapter again confirms what we've talked about in ERB's storytelling structures in his other books. We're just about halfway through the book here, and he uses this as a fairly long chapter. There's a lot of information in there to bring characters and readers up to date on certain things, and then opening the doors to where are we going to go from here? What are the new adventures that we may be facing in the second half of the book? He's very consistent in that and doing that sort of a B, C, D or A, B, C 3-part story structure. Starting out, building up, taking a moment of breath, where are we at, and then moving on.
Okay, and yeah, I think that's very well stated. It is amazing how much information Burroughs can give us, and it never seems like just a kind of boring information dump. It never interferes with the pacing of the story. Events still move around quickly. You enjoy reading every word of it. There's never like, oh, this part of the novel was a little slow because he had to tell us all about the city and its religion. It's never like that. It's like, this is an epically cool chapter, just like all the other epically cool chapters. And if people could teach elementary school this well and mix in the times tables with great action adventure scenes, it might be really effective. So
That's
Be
great.
a great way to teach history.
yes. Okay, today we're going to practice the 7 times tables, and then we're going to avoid being eaten by a dinosaur. And, and whoever's last in line is whoever can't get 7 times 9. So but yeah, making a little fun there. But one of the most impressive things about Burroughs is how much information he can impart without ever slowing down the story at all. So
Well, it's like the age-old equation for survival. I don't have to run faster than Tiger. I just have to run faster
than you. That's right.
Good advice.
Okay, but we will be back for part 2 of our discussion of Tarzan the Untamed. We'll finish it up with one more part. And we just thank everybody, as always, for listening. I will repeat the trivia question in the next episode, which should come in no more than a week, I hope. But it is, how did Nikolai Rokoff die? I'll also have decided on what the prize is by then, and I just kind of failed in my duty as producer and not picking out a specific prize. I didn't realize I hadn't done that until we started recording. So I will announce what the prize is and repeat the trivia question next time. But you can send in an answer anytime to be in the running for the prize. It's, how did Nikolai Rokoff die? And so until we're back with the next episode, once again, I am Tim DeForest. Please visit my blog at comicsradio.blogspot.com. You'll find a link to my various books there. Just as Jarrett said in the interview very kindly about me, that I am apparently a tsunami of popular culture. So by golly, do not overlook the apparently tremendous educational value of my blog and come visit me there. Jess, do you want to plug anything?
Refresh my memory. What is the address or location for our shop?
I will print that. I will publish that in the notes, and I'll send it to you as well. I don't remember right offhand myself, but thank you for that reminder. I'd forgotten that we were going to mention that we do have a store where you can buy stuff. where the Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated people have very kindly given us permission to use images from these books. And you can buy Griff merchandise, a Griff cup, a Griff shirt, a Griff carry bag, a Griff hat. A friend of mine, Benjamin Alvarez, who's a very talented writer, has done a really cool version of a Griff. And amongst the merchandise we sell at our store, it includes a Griff. And it's been what few things we've sold from the store. That's been its most popular item so far. So please visit our store. The address will be in the notes, and Jess, I will email it to you separately.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
And I wanted to tell you both, I've enjoyed tonight. As always, enjoy our discussions. We cover a lot of fine territory, always a great deal of fun. My name is Jess Terrell. It's been a pleasure being here, and I want to invite everyone to come over on Facebook and visit us at For the Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs, Facebook discussion group For the Love of All Things Edgar Rice Burroughs, where we talk ERB pretty near 24/7. Be glad to have you join us. All right.
Okay.
And Scott Stewart, I enjoyed this time too, with all the information that Jess always brings up together, and then seeing as how Tim is now considered the new wave of VRB, that it's always fun. I also could add, if you're on a search engine, if I remember right, you can just type in Cafe Press and ERB cups or ERB merchandise, and that should bring you to that page without the actual URL.
Very
Okay.
good.
Thank you. Okay, and we will return. As soon as we end the recording, I'm going to work out with Jess and Scott when we'll be recording part 2, but I'm hoping there's not more than a week between the 2 episodes. So if you're anxious to find out whether or not Tarzan eventually gets eaten by a Griff, you'll find out in the next episode. So once again, thank you everyone for listening.